welcome back to Valley Varieties. I'm April Davidson. I'm your host. I have Jessica Pittman with me here. She's with
Central Valley Justice Coalition.
That's right.
It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful.
I got totally tied up. And so go ahead and tell me what your coalition is about.
No problem. At least as long as I don't forget our name. That's all we care about, right?
There you go. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. So my name is Jessica Pittman. I am the founder and currently the associate director of Central Valley Justice Coalition. We are a nonprofit right here in Fresno. And we've actually been in the community for over 10 years.
That's great.
And our whole mission is to partner with the church and the community to prevent human trafficking. So we do that in a lot of ways. We do that through education, through partnership, and through outreach primarily. And so I'm just going to give you a tiny bit of history about us. We were actually one of the first organizations here in Fresno to really address this issue alongside our partners over at Central Valley Against Human Trafficking. And of course, the Fresno Police Department has also been instrumental in our community. So talking back 10, 15 years ago now, before a lot of people really even knew what human trafficking was, we were talking about it, learning about it. And at the time, I was actually a pastor at a church here in town. And we just actually started talking to people who were victimized by this. I actually lived really close by to where I worked at the church, and it happened to be a really well-known area for things like drugs, prostitution, homelessness. And the more I learned and actually started talking to the neighbors there that I knew and hearing their stories, I actually learned, hey, this is much more than meets the eye. This is a huge form of exploitation. We actually took a trip overseas to learn more about human trafficking in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And so that really launched us into, I would say, a movement, especially of learning early on. A lot of us were people of faith, and so we did a lot of prayer, a lot of just reading, researching, and asking people directly who experienced it how we can help. So from the very beginning, we were all about learning, and also once you learn about this, as I'm sure you know, just from the little anyone knows about this, you are compelled to do something. So as time went by, we formalized into a nonprofit about 5 years later and really focused our work on prevention. And so our whole goal is to stop human trafficking and exploitation before it starts. That's where we believe we can make the most impact. It also filled a gap we saw in our community. And so thankfully now, fast forward to where we are here in 2020, we have amazing partners, many partners who work in different capacities to all kind of come around and support, whether it's prevention and education, keeping someone from human trafficking or exploitation, or helping them get out of it, restoration, and moving forward into to better things. So
that's great. Yeah, I actually found you at a church.
Yeah, we love working with churches. That's definitely a huge part of what we do. We work with not just churches, though, so we would include any faith, any person, because we recognize that this issue does not discriminate.
It doesn't discriminate at all.
It affects everyone, and that's one of the main things we share in some of the classes and workshops we do is that we have a lot of ideas sometimes, especially now. I was sharing just recently, just a few minutes ago with you, there's a lot of talk about this. It's always been a topic in the media, but especially right now. And so our organization is really passionate about trying to break down some of the stereotypes and the myths that all of us have, because none of us know everything. And then we also have our own experience and then what we see and what we hear. And so there's always a lot to learn, and that's what we're real passionate about doing, is getting the word out. But we always say, like, once you learn something, take a step of action because there's so many needs. Yeah,
definitely. I was telling you before we started that my son is going to be 13 tomorrow, and my daughter's 14, and we were talking about the myths, and you told me you had some stuff to share with me.
Yeah, there's so many. So let's start with that one. And it's kind of a really, really big one, actually, that a lot of times when you see things that people hopefully are starting to learn, like this is maybe human trafficking or prostitution. So most people talk about sex trafficking, and that's another myth we'll come back to later. So remind me to come back to that one. But oftentimes it's easy to think that when you see a woman or a man on the streets, that they are there because of their own choices they've made. And we really won't have time in this interview to unravel all those things.
Right.
However, the numbers show us, and our experiences has really shown us that the majority of the people who are on the streets, their exploitation and their abuse started when they were children. And so we like to share our own police department that we work really closely beside the Vice unit here. They would estimate that the average age of entry for sex trafficking is between the ages of 13 and 16 years old. And so we're talking about junior hires and high schoolers, and we saw that, we see that. So we go into the schools and we work with group homes and we work with youth groups because we know, I mean, I don't have to tell you, the kids are impressionable, and so the earlier we can get them some tools to recognize for themselves the different dangers that are out there, and also for their peers. In fact, we're really, really excited that we're mobilizing more and more kids to reach their own friends, because sometimes they're the best kids, best ones who can reach them. And so, so yeah, we really believe in the youth in our community and anywhere, and so we do the best we can to empower them. But it starts with learning. It starts with learning about the red flags, how to recognize healthy and unhealthy relationships. And it goes beyond sex trafficking. There's also exploitation of labor. And so we talk about that and educate what that looks like here in Fresno and around the world. And so those two things, sex trafficking and labor trafficking, are intertwined a lot. There's a lot of intersection. But we want to teach kids all the tools we can about it and give them that power to make a difference.
Right.
So.
And so what is another myth?
Yeah, so that is the other one I'd like to talk for a minute about, is the difference between sex trafficking and labor trafficking.
Yes.
So, and not so much the difference, it's probably obvious just by the language. So we have forced labor, and we have forced labor that includes sex as part of that. And so the myth that we have seen in our work is that most people are familiar now with sex trafficking. And thankfully, we believe that's partially to our work here in the community, we hope, with our partners, but also due to the glorification of it, just the sensationalism that comes in the media with sex. And it's just a reality that, sex sells. And so it's going to make it in the news more. People are going to be aware of it more. But it goes deeper than that. It's actually easier to see because sometimes it is visible when you drive by a certain area of town, or maybe it is more visible when you're looking at certain types of massage parlors, and those are places where we know it's happening. But with labor trafficking, it's so much more hidden. And so the way I describe it is like, when you think about labor trafficking, people can be taken advantage of for work, whether they're paid unfairly, not paid at all, whether their documents are being held, maybe they have come from another country and accrued a debt that they can never hope to pay off. And so there's all of these different ways to exploit someone for work, right? But if you were just to go into like your favorite restaurant here in Fresno, you're probably not thinking, gosh, I wonder if the waiter here is being exploited for his job. I wonder if he gets paid fair. I wonder if behind the scenes, this restaurant is taking advantage of their workers or not. And so when you think about it that way, it becomes a lot more complicated because it is a lot harder to detect, to figure out. And if you were to just ask someone at a restaurant, of course, that I would never recommend that, but they're not going to most likely tell you. And so there's so many layers, but the myth we really want to break down is that sex trafficking is the only trafficking that we have here in the Valley, but also worldwide. And so numbers-wise, we share in our classes that globally speaking, the International Labor Organization has done some really good studies on numbers, and because we're an education organization, I always make sure I cite our source and tell you where we're getting our information from. But back in 2017, it's the most recent study they did on numbers, they estimated that about 25 million people are in some form of forced labor, okay? That's globally. So that's a huge number. I'll pause for a minute just to let us take that in, because I don't know about you, but 25 million,
I would have never even have stopped and thought for a second about that.
Right. It's like I'm not a numbers person, but I become more of one in this job. And there's actually about 1 million people in Fresno County. So if you multiply Fresno County times 25, you have the number globally of people being forced into some form of labor. But what's interesting about that number is that about 5 million are forced into some sort of sexual exploitation. So that means the other 20 or so is all labor trafficking. And so I just share that as one way to kind of get our minds around the fact that the labor trafficking is a far bigger issue globally. It does happen here. It's just sometimes really hard to find. It's also really controversial. There's a lot of controversial issues surrounding labor trafficking. And certainly not every time someone is not paid fairly does that mean it's a labor trafficking case, right? And so I want to be very clear about that. There's a difference between violating labor laws and an actual labor trafficking case. But the reality is there have been cases prosecuted here, and I think just like sex trafficking was about 10 to 15 years ago, my hope is that we start to learn more and identify more of what's happening here in the Valley in the next 10 years. Because what we know is just because we don't see it happening, that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right.
So.
Wow.
So that was a lot, but I do feel like it's, I hope, something that we grow to be more aware of and learn the tools about how to prevent, because our whole belief as a community organization is that every single person has a voice and a role to play, no matter who they are, what they do for a career, or if they're a student, or again, where they do or don't go to church. It doesn't matter. We need everyone at the table because it is such a crisis. And
it really is.
And we know that no one group or person or organization or any single entity can solve this. And so that's why we do everything we can to say, okay, let us help you find kind of your niche. Use what you already know you're good at. For kids, sometimes that takes a lot longer to figure out, but adults too, sometimes we have to figure out, what is my role in this? Am I going to volunteer? Am I going to give some money? Am I going to, if I'm a person of faith, can I pray more intentionally about this? Or am I a teacher and I can actually have the Justice Coalition come to my classes? So... And to be honest, that's actually why back when we really started at a church, we were like, churches are really unique, like the faith community, whether it's a church or a parish or another type of faith community, where you have people with all different skill sets gathered most of the time around a really, really good cause with the really, really great motivation. And so we were like, hey, this is a group of people that can really bring their skill set to the table. They know how to volunteer. So, we have attorneys, we have teachers, we have businessmen, we have businesswomen. So we just do what we can to find that niche and say there's something everyone can do.
And then here you just have a single mom who was just curious.
Yeah. And absolutely. Because
and we just wanted to get emails to find out what was going on.
Totally. I love that. And that's exactly my point, is everyone has a role to play. And you may think it's small, but it might we believe it's going to have a ripple effect.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't get to see. I mean, that's actually one of the most challenging things about the job we do, especially in prevention.
Yeah.
We kind of joke about that because we're like, well, I guess we can count the number of kids who didn't get trafficked. It's not a joke, but it's really it's hard sometimes to see. But we know, okay, there are certain ways we can measure and share what we're doing, how many kids did go through our programs,
right?
And so kind of going back to the youth, for your kids, if I may jump back to that for a second, we have done several curriculums, some that we write and some that other organizations write, and we really want to get the word out to kids, especially right now. So especially for all you parents out there who in this ridiculously crazy time of COVID, I'm a mom too. So I have 2 kids who are both doing school at home. One's in kindergarten, if you can imagine how fun that is. But
oh yeah.
Yeah. So the risks of being online right now are so huge. And we have so many kids that their parents have to work. Like, I work from home most of the time, where my kids are online on their tablets and they're 8, years old or so. And so it's that's actually been what we've been focusing on a lot right now is classes like our online safety classes called Technology and Trafficking, so that we can give parents like you, like me, tools to keep our kids safe, because there's no way to watch them all the time, And even if we were, like, certain kids will find ways around that, right? So we actually have a class we've made available on our website. Right now it's even on demand, so you can actually go register and just watch it on your own time.
Okay.
We have been spending the last few months getting as many of our classes online as we can, because of course we want to keep things safe.
Right.
So that class I highly recommend for you as a parent, and any of you who have kids. Basically, we used to call it teens and trafficking, and we took off the teens because pretty much any kid who has a device of their own, or even uses a device, has a friend who has a device. Like, there's real risks out there, and I can't tell you all the stories that it can be really heartbreaking and scary of kids that just don't know. They trust the person they're talking to that they can't see. Mm-hmm. So we do our best to get the word out as much as possible during this time. But it's always been an issue. But as you can imagine, with COVID, it just exploded it.
Yes.
Yeah. So people who are vulnerable are more vulnerable than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really what human trafficking is. I didn't even share our own definition, but that's basically how we describe it, is when you have a vulnerability and someone exploits that. So we all have vulnerabilities, but how can we take steps to be aware of those vulnerabilities, protect ourselves, and protect those around us?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely as a parent, it's definitely something that you wish that you could be in control of or on top of, but education is where that's going to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the first to admit it can be overwhelming, whether you're talking about online or just safety of your kids in general, and so there's no judgment on anyone anywhere. It's just, what can we do our own, in our own frame, wherever we are in our own space, how can we make it safe as possible? And if we don't have kids, we all have kids in our lives.
Right.
And it's not just kids, of course, who are impacted, but a lot of times when we're talking about prevention, it starts as young as possible. So,
yes.
So I've talked to my, little kids about especially labor trafficking and stuff like, where is your chocolate made? And that's a really, really interesting discussion to have with a kid. And it can be as simple as, do you know how chocolate's made or where it comes from? And so that's one way I've talked to my kids about it when I don't feel like they're quite ready for, the junior high and high school class programs that we do. But we're actually sharing one of our youth classes online coming up here October 8th.
Okay.
So we do everything we can to make it as safe as possible online.
Right.
And then we give about an hour workshop. And it's really a new presentation designed for kids online, since all our other ones were done in person.
Okay.
As much as possible. So this is, a bit of an experiment to see how it goes online, but we've practiced it, we've done it in person, and we have a lot of support and safety in place to make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
Talking about this kind of topic. And the good thing is, as an organization, we do the education, but we come around and support kids, especially people who aren't yet necessarily exploited or victims, but who are just at risk, a lot of risk factors, a lot of vulnerabilities. So we walk alongside kids like that, help them set goals, do a lot of that kind of stuff. And we always just say, if there's a need, if anyone watching right now knows someone who's affected by this issue, please contact us, because if we can't help, we have a partner who can. So we're more than the educational piece. We are hands-on. We have we have men, women, and children we work with who have been affected by this. And sometimes a lot of it is supporting families as well through the whole process. So we have a resource line.
Okay.
Should I give that phone number?
Yes, please.
Okay,
yes,
so
please.
It's 559-725 1865. All this can be found at our website, justicecode.org. And that resource line is not necessarily for emergencies, so we always encourage the National Human Trafficking Hotline for emergencies. So you can also find that on our website. But if you want to get into contact with us locally, we encourage you to contact us. You can text or call, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And so you definitely have somebody if it's a teenager that's struggling, if it's an adult that's struggling, because it's not gonna just be children that are struggling. There's gonna be people from all over the board that are struggling, correct?
Absolutely. And so like I said, although we have a lot of programs for youth, we also have classes for adults, and we also walk alongside adults. That is not necessarily our primary area, but that's the beauty about what we have in Fresno right now as partners. That if we're at the capacity right now, we call somebody, that we trust and we've built a relationship with over years of time. Yeah, exactly.
That's so great.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's like another myth sometimes. And in Fresno County, in our region, we have seen victims as young as 12 and as old as 72. And so it's not something that even age really, 72 is pretty old to be a victim of human trafficking, but people assume sometimes it's looks like a certain way, it's a certain, even a certain part of town. So I would just plug our classes again for that, because we kind of break down the data we have here in the Valley even. We talk about some of the people that we know who are survivors and their stories. We do our best to really protect those stories, but we share them in some of our classes with their permission, of course, by video and that kind of thing. But the first person who was ever identified in Fresno County was actually a victim of labor trafficking, and she lived in Clovis. And so we talk about that in our classes. Yeah, that is the exact reaction that we get from a lot of people.
Yeah.
She lived in Clovis, and you can actually, if you take we have several online classes. If you take them, you'll see her video. But most people wouldn't say Clovis over in the Buchanan neighborhood is like the main place you're going to find human trafficking, but that's where she was.
That's where she was.
Yeah, that's where she was. So. Yet again, another myth that it happens only in certain areas of town, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
amazing. And so, if you wanted to, in order for them to get a hold of you, is all your website information on the screen right now?
It should be, yes. So justicecode.org is our website. Perfect. I already gave the resource line, but yeah.
And so do you know the date of when that class is going to be?
So, which one?
Oh, the one where, that we were just talking about.
Yeah, so we have one coming up actually this Friday, I believe, at 10 in the morning.
Okay.
That's our basic class, and it's a live Zoom class. So 10 a.m. I hope I got that right. I think there's a flyer, so yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. So 10 a.m. on Friday. That one's about, I want to say about an hour and a half, and it's really a basic introduction. I break down some of those myths. I'm not teaching this exact class, but yeah. And then our teens and our technology and trafficking class, like I said, is actually available now. If you just register, you can get it straight to your inbox, a recording of that. We've been doing some of those live as well, and some Q&As, but I don't have a date for that. But our youth class is October 8th.
October 8th.
October 8th, yes. And we continually offer them as long as they fill up. We're going to keep offering them.
Right.
And we also, I should mention, we also do trainings for professionals or for churches, for any group. So if a group was to say, like we just did one last week for some kids, like as long as we can keep it really safe, so we are a little more selective right now.
Right.
But we've trained social workers, we've trained teachers, we've trained just community members, gone to many moms groups, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So you can just request us on our website to kind of bring a specific type of training. Because we have many, many workshops over the last 10 years. They're just not 100% all online yet.
That's great.
Yeah. So
that's great that you guys offer that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share tonight?
Just reiterating that this issue affects a lot of people. So if you're watching, listening, and even if you're not sure what I or someone I know has experienced human trafficking, if you have kind of like a question about that, or if you just want to learn more, you can learn a lot just by digging around our website. But please contact us, because we always say, like, I mean, the best case scenario is what's happening is something else. We still want to get that person help. But by making a report, or by sharing what you know, or by getting help yourself, it's the first step. And we're happy to be here for anyone who needs that. So
That's great.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I
Thank
hope you
you.
come back again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Next time I won't mess up your name.
It's all good.
Thank you, and have a great evening.